I actually, I was listening to one of these podcasts and I heard what I thought was a really cool story about how you wrote a letter to the owner. Yeah. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I when I was in Cincinnati, it was actually the year before I left. So I had played in 15 for Hugh Jackson. He had gone on to become the head coach of the Cleveland Browns after that season, but I had gone through the season, and I'd been really in 14 and 15. I think I gave up 1 sack in 2 seasons, and so pretty crazy run for a left tackle, and kind of felt like, hey man, I'm 30 something years old, but 33 or 34 at that time, but I feel great. I'm playing awesome. So I went to them and I was like, hey, my contract ends after this season. I would love to, I don't want to go into this year, because for a while there I'd been making, I don't know, probably 30% of what most left tackles were making in the league in the last couple of years of my deal. And I was like, I'm done doing that. Like, I've earned the right. Like, you guys should give me an extension and not make me have to play out this year for such a low number. And I remember them being like, hey, we'll get back to you, blah, 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 before the draft. And this was like January when the season ended, and Hugh had gone on to Cleveland. And so nothing ever happens. I keep checking with my agent, like, any word, nothing happens. And we get to the draft, and good way to get an answer without having to go through your agent is in the first round they draft Cedric Awuehi, the left tackle from the Texas A&M, who had just injured his knee during the season. They drafted a left tackle in the first round, and then the second round they drafted another kid who played left tackle and right tackle, Jake Fisher. So in the first and second round, they picked a tackle. So that's a good clue if you're wondering and you're a veteran, you're probably not coming back to that team. So needless to say, nobody had called me and really told me they were doing all that, and I was not very happy about it. So that led to like an ugly couple weeks of just like I was pissed, because I was like, listen, like, who I've been for this team, for the community, for everything else, like, I just deserve better communication than that. Like, I'm all right with like honesty. I don't like, hey, we're going to just act like, oh man, shoot, we forgot to tell you, and communicate it. So I didn't appreciate the communication part of it. So, but what I've always respected about Mike Brown, and Mike and I always had a great relationship, because I was one of the few guys who, like, I didn't care. Like, I'd walk up to Mike's office. If I had an issue with something going on, or I would just go walk in his office, knock on the door, because I always felt like if it's coming from a good place and I'm just honestly speaking about, where I am in my heart, like, there's nothing wrong with me telling this guy this. It's like in a lot of times in those kind of teams where it's family owned like that, this is not who Mike is, but it's like everyone perceives it as like, oh, that's the big bad wolf. Like, don't go up to the boss's office and speak, and it's like, I think those guys are more approachable than you think a lot of the time. And so I would always go up there. And so I went up there when I was pissed, and he was like, hey, here's the reality. We signed these 2 kids. They're probably the future of the team. And that's kind of how life goes sometimes. Like, you're at a point where we feel like the best thing for us to do is to move on in life. Life's not fair. Like, you've done a great job for us. He's like, you've been one of the best leaders that I've ever seen, in my time being around, and just a tremendous human being, but we're going to move forward with these guys, and that's our choice. And I was like, he's like, we have the right to choose. And I was like, you know what? I respect that. You're honest, whatever. So we get into the season. We start the season 8-0. And I'm like, all right, we're 8-0. We're going to our bye week. And I have just been miserable. Like, I'm miserable to deal with at home, my wife and kids. Like, I can just tell, like, it's wearing on her. Like, I am so unhappy and mad that they chose to do this to me, and not give me an extension or anything, kind of send me out here on this deal. And so I literally write him a letter. And I'm like, hey, I go through the times of, like, playing Jared Allen and playing through these different guys that I've had to go out here and protect quarterbacks for issues that came up on the team that, like, I had to come to him about, the things that were good or bad. Like, y'all made a bad decision and you need to fix this, and all these different things that had come up in the organization where I had defended the organization and the people in it. And I said, listen, I have chose to do those things my entire career and go above and beyond for everybody. And I don't regret that at all. But in the same token, what I do think that is important for me to understand is, who I am as a dad, a husband, just as a man in general to my friends. Like, I've been not the person I need to be for the last 3 or 4 months, and I'm struggling. And I was like, I got to make a choice just like you made a choice for you. And that is, at this point of the season, I've actually made the money to pay the prorated part of my bonus back to you for what I would owe you if I walked away from the game of football. And I'm choosing just like you chose. And I think for me, I'll never be able to live with myself if I don't stand up for myself. And I feel bad that I caved and I'm still playing. So I'm going to walk away after this bye week because I feel like that's the right thing for me to do if we can't come to some kind of resolution on this situation. And I was like, I'll go with my kids back to Louisiana and it'll be over and we'll move on. And I respect the crap out of him. He hit me up and he was like, basically called me into his office. I went in there and he was like, you know, you're right. And he's like, you've continued to play at a high level. You've continued to do everything right. You took the information that, you know, how things went that you're upset about and you dealt with them. And the honorable thing for us to do is to give you a year extension. And so I was like, sure, I'll take it. Well, then I reach out to Katie and Troy Blackburn, who actually, it's his daughter and her husband, who were actually running the operations of the team. Like Mike was just the owner, and at that time he kind of stepped away from doing a lot of that stuff. They were negotiating the contracts. And they're like, you know, we don't support this. It was basically like, this is between you and Mike. Like, don't call us about negotiating it. Like, it's whatever you and him talked about. Like, we're out of it. That's between you and him. We don't want anything to do with it. So I was like, wow. So this is, I'm getting an extension from the owner, and no one else supports it and doesn't even want to talk to me about it. So I'm like, okay. So I take the deal, and I'm like, hey, this is what's good for me and my family, and I'm going to protect them first and foremost. So I took the deal, went into the next season. I played great again. I was a free agent, and I'll never forget Troy Blackburn texting me in January and saying, like, you know, hey, we want to talk to you about extending you or, like, figuring that out, that what it would look like for you to come back. And I was like, you know what? This time y'all can talk to my agent. Yeah. And it was like, yeah. You didn't want to talk to me a year and a half ago? Yeah. We ain't talking now. So cool, but not cool, right? Yeah. So it was like, hey, you had your moment, and, you know, you kind of gave me the response you wanted to give me in the moment, and I'm going to tell you what mine is. You talked to my agent in March. So that's where we were at. So it was like, it was awesome though, because I had heard that Mike's like paying attention, right? Yep. I had heard that Mike Brown loved to read. And so when I was like, man, I've gone and talked to him, and maybe that's gotten contentious, or maybe it hasn't worked, maybe I should just write down what it is emotionally I feel. And when he sits and reads it, since he loves to read, that, and he doesn't feel the need to have to defend it right in that moment where we're having this personal conversation, maybe that'll hit him in a different way. And sure enough, it did. Like, I wrote him that. And then what's really cool is I signed with the Rams in free agency, and obviously it's Cincinnati was heartbroken. It was emotional deal when that happens, that I decided to go somewhere else. He wrote me a letter after that and mailed it to my house. Wow. And just an appreciation for me and those kind of things. And I have it framed actually in my office, the letter from him. Awesome. That's
incredible.
It's really cool. So it's a cool, like, man, it didn't end great for us, like as far as the organization and me, but like, I always feel like I'll always love Mike and appreciate him, and really what he did for me and my family, and believing in me as a rookie in the NFL, and then all throughout the years, multiple contracts and stuff. And then that ending, even though it wasn't exactly how we both planned it out to be for us, inevitably a lot of respect for him, just in how it ended.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to drop a like if you enjoyed the video.
And subscribe and hit the bell for a whole lot more to come.